North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news fairly, honestly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. In short, we de-propagandize the news. I make commentary. That's not news. That's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. So please share your opinion along with anything else you'd like to say as we debate the news of the day here on the Wells Report. This is an incredibly busy news day. There have been more parts of the Twitter story that have come out over the weekend, and of course today as well. We're going to bring you up to date on all of that coming up in the second hour of the Wells Report today. We have other things to discuss, and those things that we are discussing involve a Libyan explosive expert. He is the person that has been charged with assembling the device that blew up Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland in 1988. He is in U.S. custody. In fact, as we have this conversation, we are expecting that he is going to be either ushered into electronically or physically into a federal courtroom in Washington, D.C. to face prosecution for what was one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in history. Abu Aguila Muhammad Massoud is expected in a federal courtroom today, right now, as we bring this broadcast to you. This is a day after officials announced he had been arrested by the FBI, a breakthrough in the Justice Department long-running effort to hold him accountable for the Lockerbie, Scotland disaster. Authorities allege Mr. Massoud constructed the bomb used to destroy the commercial jetliner December 21st, 1988, as it flew from London to New York. The attack killed all 243 passengers on board, along with 16 crew and 11 people on the ground. Mr. Massoud's arrest means families of the victims could, for the first time, see a suspect in the bombing prosecuted in the U.S. Two other suspects were tried in Europe more than 20 years ago. Investigators in the U.S. and U.K. believe the attack was carried out by Libyan intelligence operatives. In 2003, the Libyan government acknowledged responsibility in a bid to normalize relations with Western countries and end United Nations sanctions. Longtime Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi denied personal involvement in the attack. He was killed in 2011 in a civil war aimed at toppling his regime. The task of identifying and trying the additional suspects received renewed attention under former Attorney General William Barr, who announced the charges against Mr. Massoud shortly before leaving office in 2020 at the end of the Trump administration. The charges include destruction of aircraft, resulting in death and destruction of a vehicle by means of explosives, serious allegations that could carry decades in prison if he is convicted. Much of the case is based on a confession Mr. Massoud allegedly gave after Gaddafi was overthrown and killed. After Gaddafi's ouster, Mr. Massoud was jailed for allegedly plotting against the Libyan revolution. In his confession, prosecutors said Mr. Massoud said he worked with two other Libyan intelligence officials to carry out the attack. This, by the way, is from the Wall Street Journal. Wanted to let you know where this article came from. The two officials, Abdel Basset al-Magrahi and Lamen Khalifa Fahima, came to his hotel in Malta days before the December 21st, 1988 bombing, instructed him to set a timer on an explosive device packed inside his suitcase to go off 11 hours later, handed him $500 to purchase clothes to put in the suitcase. This according to the 26-page affidavit filed in connection with Mr. Massoud's charges. He then met with the two men in an airport in Malta, handed off the suitcase near the luggage check-in, and watched Mr. Fima place it on a conveyor belt. This, according to the affidavit, citing Mr. Massoud's interview. In addition, Mr. Massoud admitted the bombing had been ordered by Libyan intelligence leadership and that Gaddafi had thanked him and other members of the team for their successful attack on the United States, according to the affidavit. Also, according to that document, Mr. Massoud's confession was corroborated by evidence gathered by Scottish and American investigators in the years after the bombing. Details of Mr. Massoud's arrest are scarce. Libyan authorities released him 3 months ago because he had cancer, but special forces based in Misrata, Libya, recently detained him again, according to a person familiar with the matter. Once again, that is Wall Street Journal copy on this. Live updates now from CNN. Here is a timeline of the events that occurred since the bombing. December 21st, 1988 rather. A Pan Am Flight 103 explodes at 3,100 feet, 31,000 feet over Lockerbie, Scotland, 38 minutes after takeoff from London. The 259 people on board the New York-bound 747 were killed, along with 11 people on the ground. July 1990, the British Civilian Aviation Authority Air Investigation Branch officially reports that an explosive device caused the explosion of the aircraft. November 13th, 1991, U.S. and British investigators indict Libyans Magri and Fima on 270 counts of murder, conspiracy to murder, and violating Britain's 1982 Aviation Security Act. The men are accused of being Libyan intelligence agents. December 15th, 1998, a U.S. appeals court rules relatives of the 189 Americans killed on the bombing can sue Libya for its possible role in sponsoring the attack. April 5th, 1999, Libya hands over suspects to the United Nations. They are taken to the Netherlands to stand trial. May 3rd, 2000, the trial of suspects Megrahi and Fima begin. January 31st, 2001, Megrahi is found guilty and jailed for a minimum of 27 years. Fima is found not guilty. October 2008, it is announced that Megrahi is suffering from terminal cancer. November 2008, then U.S. Senator Frank Lautenberg announced at a press conference the families of the American victims of the Pan Am bombing have received final compensation from the Libyan government. Each family received about $10 million paid in installments between 2004 and 2008. August 20th, 2009, Scottish Justice Secretary Kenny McCaskill announces that Megrahi will be released from prison on a compassionate grounds due to his terminal cancer. After being released, Megrahi returns to Libya and receives a hero's welcome. May 20th, 2012, Megrahi dies in Libya. December 21st, 2020, then U.S. Attorney General William Barr announces criminal charges against a former Libyan intelligence officer, Abu Aguila Masoud Kher al-Marimi. Masoud is charged in a criminal complaint for allegedly providing the suitcase with prepared explosives that was later placed on board the flight. He was currently in custody in Libya. Then December 11th, 2022, the U.S. Justice Department says the alleged bomb maker Masoud is in U.S. custody and expected to make his, quote, initial appearance in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. And that is happening even as we speak, according to the information that we have. Elsewhere, Scotland's Lord Advocate, the chief legal officer of the Scottish government, will meet with U.S. prosecutors in Washington next week regarding the Lockerbie bombing investigation. This according to a statement released today. Quote, the steps taken by U.S. Justice Authority are significant and progress towards a legal breakthrough that is welcomed by Scottish prosecutors and police, said Scottish Lord Advocate Dorothy Bain in a statement. The tragic events of December 1988 have bound Scotland and the U.S. together in deep loss and steadfast determination that all those committed this atrocity should be brought before a court. Quote, I am going to Washington, D.C. next week where I will have meetings with U.S. prosecutors and attend commemorative events to mark the anniversary of the tragedy, said Bain. Ongoing engagement here and in the U.S. between law enforcement authorities and with families who lost loved ones is an important feature of this case. There is more context here, according to CNN. A Libyan man, Abu Aguila Muhammad Masoud Kher al-Marimi, is in U.S. custody for his role in building the bomb that destroyed Pan Am Flight 103, December 1st, 1988. The U.S. has charged him for his involvement 2 years ago. This according to a spokesman for the U.K. Crown Office and Prosecutor of Fiscal Services, telling CNN on Sunday. The attack killed 270 people as the bomb detonated over Lockerbie, Scotland, as the aircraft flew from London to New York. The Lockerbie bombing remains the deadliest terrorist attack to take place in the UK. Scottish prosecutors and police, working with UK government and US colleagues, will continue to pursue the investigation with the sole aim of bringing those who acted along with al-Megrahi to justice. Scotland's Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Office Services said in a statement it would not comment further on the progress or next steps of the investigation at this time. And then there is this. Victoria Cummock. She is the widow of Lockerbie passenger John B. Cummock and founder and CEO of Pan Am 103 Lockerbie Legacy Foundation, said at a news conference today The families of those who died are asking for the arrested bombing suspect's trial to begin immediately. She said that for the past 34 years, the failure of the U.S. Department of Justice to prosecute anyone associated with the bombing felt like a betrayal. She called today's arraignment of the suspect in Washington, D.C., which was scheduled for 1 p.m. today, but was then moved later in the day to now, in fact. She called that the first significant step to hold any suspect accountable. Speaking about her husband, John, she called him her best friend, who was the father of their 3 children. She said she was 38 when he died. She and her children were age 3, 4, and 6 when John died in a bombing. I know that if I had been on that plane, John would have been trying to push for justice on the Americans' behalf, just like I have. He was a remarkable human being. And so she says, and there's no reason to doubt her. And so that is the very latest that we have here. And as I said, what we do have is we have at least some progress in a few things. One, when it comes to terrorist attacks, America has a very, very long memory. And that is something that is essential. Also, by the way, there is something even more essential here. The United States has a much more serious, if not, it's not draconian, but a much more strict U.S. Justice system, or a justice system, as far as the U.S. is concerned, whereby people who are found guilty of terrorist incidents here are, in most cases, seriously punished, as I would expect this man to be, if indeed he's found guilty. And that does bring up a weakness in the American judicial system. For example, this guy's supposed confession, when he was in Libya and he gave that confession, he was under the auspices of a brutal warlord. And I'm sure that the defense will say that that actual statement of guilt was indeed coerced. In other words, there are an awful lot of ways that prosecutors can lose a case in the American justice system. The reason is because here in the United States, it is essential that we all agree on the premise that taking someone's freedom and liberty away, whether they're a U.S. citizen or not, is such a huge punishment in our way of thinking from a standpoint of a nation built on freedom and liberty, that we would rather make mistakes in letting someone go free rather than make a mistake in putting someone in jail without the proper proof. The problem with all that is that when you start dealing with terrorists in the first place that are extra national when it comes to their motivations, in other words, they are not part of in this particular case, that's true, but typically terrorists are not bound to a nation state. They are essentially people operating outside of a nation state. In this particular case, that may not be the way it is, but what is true is that the Europeans and other people simply do not punish these people like we think they should. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. The supposed bomb maker of the 1988 Lockerbie 747 bombing is in U.S. custody. Reuters is now reporting that a Libyan intelligence operative suspected of making the bomb that killed 270 people will appear in a federal court today, even as we speak, in front of U.S. Magistrate Robin Merriweather. That was expected to happen at 3 p.m. this afternoon Eastern Time, which is 2 o'clock our time here in the Central Time Zone. The capture over the weekend of Abu Aguila Muhammad Masoud Kher al-Marimi comes nearly 34 years after the bomb on board a Boeing 747, which was flying from London to New York City, killed all 259 people on board and 11 on the ground. As we reported, this, however, is the Reuters version of the story. He allegedly confessed to his crime to a Libyan law enforcement official back in 2012. He is tentatively due to make his appearance before Magistrate Merriweather at 3 p.m. Masoud is one of three people whom U.S. and British law enforcement have been alleged involved with the 1988 bombing. In 1991, two other Libyan intelligence operatives, Abdul Basseh al-Magrahi and Lamin Khalifa Fima, were charged in the bombing. A Scottish trial before court at Camp Zeist in the Netherlands. Magrahi was found guilty of the bombing in 2001, was jailed for life. He was later released because he was suffering from cancer and died at his home in Tripoli in 2012. Fima was acquitted of all charges. Scottish prosecutors have maintained that Magrahi did not act alone. At the time of the bombing, U.S. investigators uncovered evidence that one of the possible suspects went by the name of Abu Aguila Masoud, but were unable to locate him. This during a sworn statement by an FBI agent in support of the government's criminal complaint. Masoud was not formally charged by the United States until 2020, when it was uncovered that there was fresh evidence revealing he had apparently confessed to his crimes during a Libyan law enforcement activity. Stephanie Bernstein, whose husband Mike Bernstein died in the bombing, is vice president of a family group, Victims of Pan Am Flight 103, that has been pushing for Masoud's apprehension. Surreal. It was surreal, she said, as she walked into the courthouse to attend the hearing, because we've been working toward this day ever since the charges were revealed 2 years ago. With a chaotic situation in Libya and so much else going on in the world, Bernstein said, we never thought it was going to happen. Mike Bernstein was a Justice Department official in the Office of Special Investigators that tracked Nazi-era criminals. In a criminal complaint, Masoud was charged with destruction of an aircraft resulting in death and destruction of a vehicle used in interstate commerce by means of an explosive resulting in death. Since then, a formal indictment against him has not been made public. It will be today. During the 2012 interview with a law enforcement official in Libya, Masoud admitted to building the bomb that brought down Pan Am Flight 103 and to working with Magrahi and Fima to execute the plot. This according to an FBI agent's sworn statement in support of the governor's criminal complaint. Masoud also told the interview he was involved in similar plots and said the bombing was ordered by Libyan intelligence leadership, according to the complaint. He also claimed the former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, who was killed by rebels in October of 2011, thanked him and other members of the team for their successful attack against the United States. Sir Ian Livingstone, the Chief Constable of Police Scotland, said in a statement on Twitter, the bombing has had a profound impact and promised to continue to work on the investigation. I pay tribute to the families of the victims for their courage and dignity that they've demonstrated for 34 years. My thoughts remain with them today. We will bring you anything else that comes up in regards to this arraignment today. We'll bring you all that information as soon as it becomes available. This is the Wells Report. As I said, lots and lots and lots of news today. On the southern border, more than 1,000 immigrants, illegal immigrants at that, crossed the border into El Paso, Texas this morning. We've got those details coming up, and also more details on the Twitter files. Files number 4 and 5 have been released. They are explosive, and we will have that for you in the second hour of the Wells Report. For this, the 12th day of December, year of our Lord 2022. Back in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Jan Thompson tells us that there is snow in London. I like London. London's kind of cool. Anyway, Jan is living there. I'm trying to figure out whether she's British or whether she's American, but when I say north to south, coast to coast, and around the world, I'm not kidding. We have lots of people in Europe and elsewhere listening to this broadcast. Australia, Korea, we've got a lot of people watching this show. It's the weirdest thing, and I want to thank them very much for joining us here on the Wells Report, as I do you. While we're on the subject of international news, a migrant caravan of more than 1,000 people crossed into El Paso, Texas. Fox News got the footage and showed it exclusively. It was the moment a migrant caravan with more than 1,000 people crossed over the U.S.-Mexico border into El Paso. It was taken last night. It comes as U.S. Customs and Border Protection sources said today that El Paso has seen more than 2,397 migrant encounters in the last 24 hours alone. It's outrageous. The city of El Paso has a dashboard that reports Border Patrol in that sector currently has 5,100 migrants in custody. Customs and Border Protection's El Paso sector on the Texas border with Mexico has seen an increase in encounters. This, according to CBP, in a statement to Fox News. It happened this afternoon. In order to process individuals as safely and expeditiously as possible, Border Patrol agents from Big Bend and CBP officers from El Paso field offices are assisting with the processing. The thing you need to understand about this processing here, okay, is that while those CBP officers are doing the processing, they're not on the border actually doing the enforcement. And this onslaught, this overrun of the American border is being ignored by the government that is charged by the Constitution to protect it. And that is just a plain violation. It's a violation of everyone's oaths of office that are allowing this to happen. It is indeed dereliction of duty and nothing more. It's nothing more elegant or more difficult than that. It is dereliction of duty. Officials, by the way, are starting mass releases of these hundreds of migrants into El Paso city streets prior to the border crossings. Mexican police escorted nearly 20 buses full of migrants into the Mexican city of Ciudad Juarez, which is located across from El Paso. The police released the migrants into various non-governmental organizations. The migrants then walked from the non-governmental organizations and crossed illegally into El Paso. Video recorded by a passenger inside one of the migrant buses showed their Mexican police escort. You see, Donald Trump, when he was the president of the United States, stopped an awful lot of this cooperation from Mexican authorities with these people simply by saying, we're going to start charging tariffs. And before you know it, there were nearly 25,000 Mexican soldiers on the border of the United States. That, of course, was set aside as being some sort of barbaric terribleness on the part of the Trump administration. That's when President Biden became the president of the United States. What's worse? And remember, we've got 5,100 people currently in El Paso, Texas. Remember what happens when hundreds of people are sent to New York, not thousands. Hundreds of people are sent to New York and Chicago and Seattle, Washington, and in other places around the country that are declaring emergencies. El Paso isn't declaring an emergency. They've got 5,100 people living in their city right now that have no basis whatsoever in living here. The government of the United States is in violation of the Constitution of the United States. Everyone who swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States is in violation of their oaths of office. That's an impeachable offense. Now, of course, each political party has dirty hands on this, all the way back to Ronald Reagan with the first tranche of amnesty for these people that only led to more and more and more and more. And well, here we are now. Now, everybody's pointing at this Title 42 that is going to be out of effect, I believe, on December 22nd. They're saying that this is significant. You have to understand, Title 42 is on very shaky legal ground. It always has been, because it has very little to do with what is actually happening on the border. What's happening on the border is that these people are trying to get across the border. Title 42 is a way to keep them on the other side of the border because they have not tested for COVID-19. Now, remember what the president said. President Biden said, well, the pandemic's over. Therefore, any kind of legal bolstering for the use of Title 42 to keep these people out of the country was undercut at the knees with that statement. And of course, the legal people, the legislative authorities in Washington, D.C. are not going to pass a law that keeps those people wherever they are as being successfully able to claim asylum. See, these people are coming to the United States and claiming asylum. There's a treaty that we have with virtually every other country on the planet, but we don't with Mexico, that says as soon as they touch soil of a country that is not the one that they're trying to get asylum from, then they have successfully created an asylum situation. That means all these people should be processed for asylum in Mexico. And Mexico's just ignoring the possibility or the actual reality of the fact that that should be the way things are, because they don't want these people in their country. What they want to do is they just want to be a conduit to bring these people to the United States. It's insidious. It's awful. It's terrible. It's absolutely unacceptable at any level. And yet we continually find ourselves right here in this mess, especially in Texas and all the other border states. In fact, there are no non-border states in the United States of America. And these people are just walking right into the country and turning themselves in and expecting us to give them a living, all because they were invited here by the Biden administration. And once again, I have to point out that the difference between people coming to Texas and Arizona and Florida and all of these places, California, they don't care. But the people that are coming here have been invited by all of these sanctuary cities, the ones that are complaining and decrying the fact that they now have to declare emergencies in their cities because they have a few hundred of these people. What was it, 2,300, something like that, in the last 24 hours? Yeah, 2,397 migrant encounters in the last 24 hours in the El Paso sector. What about Del Rio? What about elsewhere in the RGV, the Rio Grande Valley? What about all those places? What about Eagle Pass? What have they seen in the last 24 hours? I can tell you what they've seen. They've seen an unbelievable onslaught of people coming to the United States, as if it's the last lifeboat of any kind of real life that they'll ever have a chance to have. I'm sorry, I'm an American taxpayer. I truly understand the plight of these people, and I feel very badly for them. I do. I feel very, very badly for them. But the problem is that by virtue of the fact that these people can leave their countries and come here, which through the insidious process of Mexican treachery, in my humble view, that they're doing this to us, it just tells you what kind of a relationship we have with the country of Mexico. But the people that are leaving all these other countries, they're leaving because their governments are either dangerous or crazy, or the cartels are just absolutely in charge of everything. What ends up happening is that the reason to actually solve those problems in those countries is thus removed. They're just removed. There's no impetus to solve the problems in those countries. And what's being talked about right now is, well, yeah, we've got a problem on the border. The president isn't going to go to the border. What he's going to do is throw money at it. What money? We're $32 trillion in national debt. What money are you going to throw at the border? I mean, I don't have any idea why it is that every state in the union has not sued the government of the United States for dereliction of duty, or who brings charges. I mean, the Department of Justice isn't going to do it because that is now a political organization. It used to be a law enforcement organization, but we're no longer a nation of laws. We are now a nation of politics. And it's disastrous. And we, the people of the United States, did have a chance to do something about it. We had a chance to do something about it, and somehow we muffed it. Somehow we muffed it. These people that are currently running these policies, they honestly believe that they are correct. Now, I have pointed out on several different occasions that I've been down on that border as a soldier of Texas. None of the statements that I make about my duty on the border have anything to do with the Texas Military Department or the Texas State Guard, of which I am a part. These are my own personal opinions. But I went down to that border for a reason. I went down for that border. I went down to that border to be a citizen of Texas and to protect my state. And I did that work. And I very likely may end up doing it again. And the reason is because someone has to do it. Someone has to stand in that breach. My brothers and sisters in the Texas National Guard and the Texas State Guard are doing just that. But we have to do more. We can stop this. We can close the border in just about 8 hours. We can close it faster if we want to use actual national assets. I'm just going to leave it at that. But we need to close this border. And that we don't close the border tells you that the government of the United States is, from top to bottom, side to side, corrupt. And it doesn't make any difference what political party they're a part of. This is the government of the United States abdicating its constitutional responsibilities to protect the nation that it theoretically lords over. It's right there in the Constitution. There is no ambiguity. There is no ambiguity. Our entire government is corrupted by this mess. And yeah, I see an awful lot of Republicans going down there and saying, we're going to do something about this as soon as we get power. Yeah, and then they snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory in the 2022 election. Well, you know, we just don't have the quality of candidates that we need. Yeah, Mr. McConnell, you have the highest quality of losers in any political party anywhere in the world. You guys are losers. You like losing. You enjoy losing. And you know, normally I wouldn't care one way or another. You know, the only thing that I have any problem with regarding the Republican Party is the time I wasted trying to get it to actually be American and instead of being Republican. Well, I don't do that anymore. No, I do not. I just don't do it anymore. What I do now is I sit back and I watch the stylings of the Republican Party over and over and over again, having a golden opportunity to defend this land from a very honest and very straightforward political party that hates the country and wants to destroy it and is doing everything they possibly can to make that happen. It's so bad, by the way, that there are members of their own party that are quitting in disgust. We'll be talking about that coming up in just a few minutes. But there is no excuse for this. Neither political party has an ounce of cover in this vast crime against we, the people of the United States. There is no country without a border. It is essential It is essential that this be solved forthwith. 302 Americans die every day because of fentanyl coming across the border of Mexico into the United States. Every 10 days. That's another 9/11 attack death toll. And you know where you hear that statistic? Right here. And only here. Of all the things my colleagues in all the major news organizations have stolen from this broadcast, I really wish they'd steal that one. It's not hard to do. I did it myself. I got the statistics, and I came up with it myself. They can too. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 302 Americans die every day of fentanyl poisoning in these United States. Every single day. And what are we doing about it? Nothing. The President of the United States is going to Arizona and doing a ribbon cutting on a brand new factory, or an existing factory, or whatever factory it was, making computer chips. Gosh, that's a great thing, isn't it? Meanwhile, maybe 100 to 200 miles to his immediate right, there are people flooding over the border at his invitation. It's outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. Cleo points out that one of our dear friends of the Wells Report, a longtime fan of this broadcast, Gail Williams Meeks, her son died of fentanyl poisoning in September. You will, if you don't know someone who's lost a child or lost a friend or lost a husband or a wife of fentanyl poisoning, just give yourself time. Sooner or later, it's going to touch your life. It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Let's see. We are being invaded at the Democrats' invitation. It's not racist to want secure borders for all American citizens. We do not have to take in the whole world. It's insanity. Correct. It is insanity. These people actually said that the reason that we have to import all these people is because our birth rate's so low. Oh, really? Yeah. And how much money do you send to Planned Parenthood every year to make sure our birth rate is so low? Since this is an invasion, why don't we treat it as an invasion? Bring out the tanks. Well, it's not exactly an army. That's why I keep trying to point out an invasion involves weapons and tanks and rockets and so on and so forth. It's an actual armed incursion. This is basically an overrun. We are being overrun by refugees. All the people that were leaving the war zones in Europe and headed into France and so on and so forth and elsewhere. That's what we are dealing with. We muffed it because we were talking about the Republican Party muffing the election. They muffed it because they didn't cheat. Well, yeah, I guess. I even asked on this broadcast. We pointed out that the Republican Party was not doing what the Democrat Party was doing, which was harvesting ballots and doing all of that. And I asked, I said, do we want more of that in these United States or less? I said less. We want less election cheating, not more. I mean, we've already got case after case after case where more people than registered voters voted in any given precinct. Just how bad do we want that to be? It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. If all elections were legal and above board, Democrats would never win in most states. I don't know how these people look at themselves in the mirror. They lie, cheat, and steal to keep power. That's your assertion. That is your assertion. But are they actually lying and cheating? Or is that the way the game is played? Are those rules actually in place? Both political parties are at fault. They use the Constitution as toilet paper. We have a right to secure a border. Borders. No other country in the world permits this. Correct. This is why we should not expect District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. to care one whit about Texans or Texas or Arizona or New Mexico or Florida or any other state in the union. These people want to do away with the Electoral College, which does away with all the states in the union. Because suddenly Wyoming doesn't matter. More people live in New York than live in Wyoming. Wyoming has no voice in who without the Electoral College, Wyoming has no voice in who the president is. That's how revolutions start, in case you're wondering. Let's see what else. How does fentanyl get into anything unless it's on purpose? Correct. Drug addicts know it's a problem. Most have the counteragent ready, not all. Schools are getting ready to get Narcan at schools. It's outrageous. If fentanyl is a chemical attack, we have foreign policy to counter that militarily. Yes, we do. But what are we going to do? Are we going to call in an airstrike on the factories in Red China that actually come up with the precursor chemicals? Or are we going to hit the Mexican combining laboratories that actually turn it into fentanyl and turn it into what looks like candy and counterfeit pills? Look like Adderall, for example. They look exactly like Adderall, but they're filled with fentanyl. That's how we keep losing 300 people every single day. Yeah, in a street fight, there are no rules. If the street fight in America's elections is that there are no rules, if the rules are there are no rules, then what does the Republican Party do? Do they abandon their rules too? How many rules do we need to abandon in this country before we have chaos? If you look at our border, is that not what we're seeing right this minute? If it's not chaos, then what is it? Coming up in just a couple of seconds here on the Wells Report, hour number 2, we're going to be talking about Twitter. One American with a very, very big checkbook decides to fight for freedom of speech like no other human being has ever done. More of that story coming up in just a moment on the Wells Report. Okay, that's hour number 1. We'll be back with the second hour here in just a couple of moments. Thanks for coming. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. What do we do here? We report the news, honestly and fairly, every single day, Monday through Friday, from 2 until 5 p.m. Central Time in the United States. 3-hour newscast. It's interactive. We report the news, honestly, fairly, like I said. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary. That's not the news. It's just my opinion. But I tell you when I'm making an opinion. I don't try to make my opinion news. That's what changes this broadcast from what you're used to. And then there's debate. In the United States, the Constitution allows for something called checks and balances. We have that on the Wells Report because this show is constitutionally compliant. And the simple case of the matter is that what I say, from a standpoint of opinion, is open for debate. But then again, so is everything else. Just because this is news, this is generated by other people. I go through it as best I possibly can and report all the pieces of information that are missing in many of these stories. That's why I say we de-propagandize the news, because the science of propaganda is not what you add to a news story. It's what you leave out. And so that's what I spend my time doing every day, going through the news. Version after version of the same story. The mainstream media is ignoring something that they are complicit in, which is the scandal, perhaps the greatest scandal from a constitutional standpoint in the history of the United States. The scandal of an American free press abandoning the truth, playing politics, getting caught red-handed thanks to Elon Musk and his willingness to open up the files of internal communications of Twitter and spill them out at our feet from one end of the planet to the other. Over the weekend was part 4. Part 5 was today. We're going to go through all of it today so that you have some idea what's going on. Michael Shellenberger over the weekend released another installment of the internal files in the latest batch, highlighting the chaos within the company on the day after the January 6th Capitol Hill riot. The removal of Donald Trump, January 7th, author Shellenberger wrote Saturday night to begin a larger thread. As the pressure builds, Twitter executives build a case for a permanent ban. On January 7th, senior Twitter executives create justifications to ban Trump, seek a change of policy for Trump alone, distinct from other political leaders, express no concern for free speech or democracy in this ban. And that's what's being reported in this first post. It goes on and on and on. We're going to get to it, but I'm reading the article that describes it. Shellenberger's thread starts off by showing how Twitter employees had previously resisted calls to ban Trump from the platform, but then outlined how they went about pushing for just that as calls to ban Trump intensified. Shellenberger referenced public calls from former First Lady Michelle Obama and many other prominent figures calling for Trump's ban on January 7th. The next post stated that Twitter CEO at the time, Jack Dorsey, was on vacation, delegated much of the responsibility to senior executives, including former Twitter head of trust and safety, Yoel Roth, who Shellenberger points out was overwhelmingly progressive. Read socialist, read communist. That's what progressives are. In 2017, Roth tweeted that there were actual Nazis in the White House, said Shellenberger. In April of 2022, Roth told a colleague that his goal was to drive change in the world, which is why he decided not to become an academic. The thread goes on to say that Dorsey sent an email to employees January 7th asking them to remain consistent with policies, including the rights of users to return to Twitter after a temporary suspension. After that email, a screenshot shows Roth reassuring an employee that people who care about this aren't happy with where we are. You think? It's outrageous. Around 11:30, Roth DMs his colleagues with news that he's excited to share, said Shellenberger. Guess what? Jack just approved repeat offender for civic integrity. The new approach would create a system where 5 violations or strikes would result in permanent suspension. Progress, a member of Roth's team says back when Schellenberger writes, makes clear that they had been pushing Dorsey for greater restrictions on the speech Twitter allows around elections. A colleague then asks Roth if the decision means that Trump can be banned given that Trump had one remaining strike. Does the incitement to violate violence aspect change the calculus? One employee wrote. Roth responded, it does not. Trump continues to have one strike remaining. This is for everything else, Roth said. Schellenberger then wrote that Roth's colleague's query heavily foreshadows what will happen the following day. January 8th, Twitter announces a permanent ban on Trump due to a risk of further incitement of violence. On January 8th, Twitter says its ban is based specifically on how President Trump's tweets are being received and interpreted, said Schellenberger. But in 2019, Twitter said it did not attempt to determine all potential interpretations of the content or its intent. In other words, they're charging President Trump with thought crime. Schellenberger wrote the only message from a Twitter employee expressing serious concern about potential free speech ramifications of banning Trump came from a junior-level employee who said it's a slippery slope to make one-off ad hoc decisions that don't appear rooted in policy. Whoever that kid is a genuine patriot. Schellenberger provided examples of Twitter employees using the term one-off in Slack discussions, which he says reveals significant employee discretion over when and whether to apply warning labels on tweets and strikes on users. Twitter employees recognize the difference between their own politics and Twitter's term of service, but they also engage in complex interpretations of content in order to stamp out prohibited tweets, as a series of exchanges over the Stop the Steal hashtag reveal, said Schellenberger. Roth immediately DMs a colleague to ask if they add Stop the Steal and hashtag QAnon conspiracy term, Kraken, to a blacklist of terms to be de-amplified. Roth's colleague objects that blacklisting the Stop the Steal risks de-amplifying counter speech that validates the election. Let's see. Indeed notes one of Roth's colleagues a quick search of the Stop the Steal tweets and their counter speech. Schellenberger's thread continued rather. But they quickly come up with a solution. De-amplify accounts with Stop the Steal in the name profile since those are not affiliated with counter speech. Are you seeing the way they do this? They weasel around their own rules in an effort to quash political speech during an election. Schellenberger also, this is Orwellian. This is 1984, all over it. Schellenberger also highlighted how Twitter employees struggled deciding whether to punish users who posted screenshots of Trump's deleted January 6th tweets, with one saying, quote, "We should bounce these tweets with a strike given the screenshot violates the policy," and another saying, "They are criticizing Trump, so I'm hesitant with applying strikes to this user because they were criticizing Trump, therefore pursuing the political imperative, as opposed to one based on fairness." Outrageous. What if a user dislikes Trump and objects to Twitter's censorship? The thread continues. The tweet still gets deleted, but the intention is not to deny the election result. No punishing strike is applied. If there are instances where the intent is unclear, please feel free to raise. Around noon, a confused senior executive in advertising sends a DM to Roth. Sales exec. Jack says, "We will permanently suspend Trump if our policies are violated after a 12-hour account lock." What policies is Jack talking about? Roth. Any policy violation. Any policy violation. What happens next, according to Schellenberger, is essential to understanding the justification used to ban Trump. Sales exec. Are we dropping the public interest policy now? Roth, 6 hours later in this specific case. We're changing our public interest approach for his account. Yeah. Thanks, Joel. We'll connect with comms team for sure. One last question. In the past, we've exempted policy violation from a world leader due to public interest value. Are we dropping the public interest now, and any new violation could be a trigger for me to understand? Again, we'll check with comms regarding what we can and cannot share publicly. Joel Roth. Sorry for the slow reply. I've been back to back all day today. In this specific case, we're charging our public interest approach for his account to say any violation would result in suspension. We aren't completely getting rid of the public interest approach, although we do have work planned on revisions in H1 2021. The ad exec is referring to Twitter's policy of public interest exceptions, which allows the content of elected officials, even if it violates Twitter rules, if it directly contributes to understanding or discussion of a public matter of concern, said Schellenberger. Schellenberger then reported that Twitter moderation looked to ban Representative Matt Gaetz, even though it doesn't quite fit anywhere. Duh. Roth even mentioned personally trying to talk to Twitter's safety team into removal as a conspiracy that incites violence. Yeah. They're trying to figure out ways to quell speech. And they're just simply throwing whatever they possibly can into the bucket, ruminating about it, and then acting on it. Around 2:30, comms execs DM Roth, direct message Roth, to say they don't want to make a big deal out of the QAnon ban to the media because they fear if we push this, it looks like we're trying to offer up something in place of the thing that everybody wants. Yes, said Roth. Later that evening, Roth corresponded with a Twitter engineer who reached out via direct message. The engineer said Trump's account is not technically different from anybody else's, yet is treated differently due to his personal status without corresponding Twitter rules to clarify the responsibilities that should come with that status. Roth's response hints at how Twitter could justify deviating from its longstanding policy, said Schellenberger, as Roth and Twitter felt comfortable deviating from its own policy. To put a different spin on it, policy is one part of the system of how Twitter works. We ran into the world changing faster than we were able to adapt the product or policy, Roth said in response. Amid the company's push for banning Trump and those who spoke out about the 2020 presidential election, a junior employee attempted to call Twitter to stick to its own policies. The evening of January 7th, the same junior employee who expressed an unpopular opinion about ad hoc decisions that don't appear rooted in policy speaks up one last time before the end of the day. Schellenberger said the same employee that said decisions to ban and suspend certain users on a whim could push an idea of Twitter tyranny. He wrote, "My concern is specifically surrounding the unarticulated logic of the decision by Facebook. That space fills with the idea, conspiracy theory, that all internet moguls sit around like kings casually deciding what people can and cannot see, which is exactly where we are right now. Remember, we're only seeing this because Elon Musk has opened the door. We're only seeing this because Elon Musk has opened the door. What happened at Google? YouTube? What happened at Facebook? Instagram? What happened in all of these other places? How many violations of the First Amendment are these companies guilty of? Well, they're private companies. They're not guilty of any of them. Oh, yeah? I disagree. If you're doing business in the United States of America, you need to operate under the auspices of the United States of America. That means the Constitution, right? This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary, not the news, and we debate. We're going through what happened over the weekend. Tranche number 5 from Barry Weiss, the former New York Times reporter and editor, will be coming up in just a little bit. I wanted to finish this from the guy who has been putting all of this stuff together. Put tranche number 4 together, and that would be Michael Shellenberger. Okay, Michael Shellenberger, and what they ended up doing is they ended up essentially just made things up as they went along, and it was noticed not just by this one employee, a junior employee, saying, in my humble opinion, but also a guy named Will Oramus. He noticed the inconsistency. He linked to an article for 10 at Medium, I guess that's medium.com, called Facebook Chucked Its Own Rule Book to Ban Trump, which is what I meant. What about Facebook? What about Google? Jan Thompson, reporting from London, England today, mentions that Google was used to chase down the January 6th rioters. Just exactly how deep does the FBI go into social media? Now, make no mistake, that's a great intelligence source. Social media is amazing. What people will put on their Facebook pages and so on and so forth. I mean, law enforcement does not have the capability to be able to get into somebody's life and get that information. And yet people just put it out there for anybody. It's outrageous. In the article, Will Oramus said, dominant platforms have always been loath to own up to their subjectivity because it highlights the extraordinary unfettered power they wield over the global public square and places the responsibility for that power on their own shoulders. It's true. So they hide behind an ever-changing rule book, alternatively pointing to it when it's convenient and then shoving it under the nearest rug when it isn't convenient. Facebook's suspension of Trump now puts Twitter in an awkward position. If Trump does indeed return to Twitter, the pressure on Twitter will ramp up to find a pretext on which to ban him as well. This, according to Oramus, Twitter executives said Shellenberger. That's exactly what they did. They just made it up as they went along over the objections of their own employees. It's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. And that takes us to part 5, which came out today. And it's truly, truly eye-watering. I have the raw data that I'm going to share with you because I think that's important. I think you should have the raw data, and I'll bring that to you here in just a couple of minutes. But to give you some basic flavor of it before we take this break. The 5th installment of Elon Musk's Twitter files, reported by Fox News, revealed that staffers believe the tweets written by former President Donald Trump around the events of January 6th had not actually violated their own policies, despite the company saying it did, saying that these tweets did at the time. For years, Twitter had resisted both internal and external calls to ban Trump on the grounds that blocking a world leader from the platform or removing their controversial tweets would hide important information that people should be able to see and debate. Bari Weiss of the Free Press, formerly of the New York Times, wrote towards the beginning of her thread on Monday, today. But after January 6th, as Matt Taibbi and Shellenberger MD, Michael Shellenberger, have documented, pressure grew both inside and outside Twitter to ban Trump. Weiss said dissenters within Twitter did not want to ban the president, including one who wrote, "Maybe because I'm from China, I deeply understand how censorship can destroy the public conversation." There's more. We are sharing it with you. You must see it. You must hear it, and you must understand it. That's what news is. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We're going through the fifth bunch of Twitter files. They're called tranches, but it seems so pretentious for me to use that word. By the way, if you find value in this broadcast, please share it with your friends. Subscribe to it. Give us a thumbs up or a like or whatever that is. Those help. We would sincerely appreciate it. And if you'd like to support the show financially, go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. Patreon, patreon.com/The Wells Report. Send us a buck a month. It's really, really cool. It's very, very helpful, and it helps alleviate some of the expense. This is an independent broadcast. I put this together every day myself. John David Productions is the shell company that puts all this stuff together, and let me tell you something. It's expensive. If you'd like to help, it would be wonderful. What are the tweet files called? They're called the Twitter files. This is part 5. Twitter files, part 5. Okay? And we're going to bring those to you. This is from Bari Weiss. She is from her company Free Press. Okay? And she used to work for the New York Times, but walked away because it was so terrible. It was just so bad. She was so upset with it. All right, so this is part 5. This came out today. On the morning of January 8th, President Donald Trump, with one remaining strike before being at risk of permanent suspension from Twitter, tweets twice at 6:46 a.m. Quote, this is from the President of the United States at the time. The 75 million great American patriots who voted for me, America first and make America great again, will have a giant voice in long into the future. They will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any way, shape, or form. That's tweet number 1. 744. To all those who have asked, again, this is from President Trump. To all those who have asked, I will not be going to the inauguration on January 20th. Okay? So that's what President Trump actually issued with one strike remaining on January 8th. Okay? All right. For years, Trump had resisted calls both internally and externally to ban President Trump on the ground that blocking a world leader from the platform or removing their controversial tweets would hide important information that people should be able to see and debate. This is number 5. Our mission is to provide a forum that enables people to be informed and to engage their leaders directly. The company wrote in 2019, Twitter's aim was to protect the public's right to hear from their leaders and hold them to account. Lofty goals. Poisoned by politics. After January 6th, as M. Tiabi and Michael Schellenberger have documented, pressure grew inside and outside of Twitter to ban President Trump. There were dissenters inside Twitter, okay? And here's what they had to say. Maybe because I'm from China, I deeply understand how censorship can destroy the public conversation. Thursday, January 7th. I understand this fear, but I also think it's important to understand that censorship by a government is very different than censorship of the government. The First Amendment in the U.S. and similar legislation in other countries with similar concepts exists specifically to prevent the government from silencing the people. And then on Thursday, later on in the day, a minute later, in fact, I respect that, but realistically, we impose far stricter rules on effectively everyone else on the platform. Thursday, January 7th, again, 1 minute later. We started by restricting his tweets when they became a threat to democracy. We seemed like that was our red line. Yesterday, he clearly attempted to overthrow our democratic system of government and showed no sign of remorse. If this is not a clear reason to suspend him, again, an unhinged ruler, attempting to subvert the world's most powerful democracy, I'm not sure what would be. Shrug, they put in. Okay? Voices like that one appears to be a distinct minority within the company across the Slack channels. Many Twitter employees were upset that Trump hadn't been banned earlier. After January 6th, Twitter employees organized to demand their employer ban Trump. There's a lot of employee advocacy happening, said one Twitter employee. I'm still struggling to understand the decision to not ban Trump altogether, given he is inciting people to violence, and that has led to people being killed. And I think we owe our people an explanation externally. This is the elephant in the room, said someone else. It feels like Twitter policy is engaged with someone acting on bad faith, and we won't acknowledge it. Do we have any belief that Trump will not stop tweeting incitements to violence? Then somebody else says if Alex Jones was shut down for get your battle rifles, he's exceeded that standard. How? I think a lot of employees must share these concerns. Is there any sort of channel where the group can organize more action? There is a lot of employee advocacy happening both here and at this other place that is incomprehensible. I understand that he was our president, and maybe we have and may have been the reason that we were hesitant to do it. But I think come January 20th, there's absolutely no excuse why his account shouldn't be suspended for good. I have friends with 1,000 followers that also believe that. Okay. Barry Weiss writes, we have to do the right thing and ban this account, said one staffer. It's pretty obvious he's going to try to thread the needle of incitement without violating the rules, said another. Let's see. Friday, January 8th, that last sentence, we have to do the right thing and ban this account. That last sentence, we have to do the right thing and ban this account. They say it 3 times. We don't have a good track record on acting on his account, except the clearest, most explicit cases, and even then, in my opinion, extraordinary circumstances demand extraordinary leadership. It took 3 years, but I've lost faith. Actual votes, Trump Republican Party, 232,000, 46.9%, 74,223,774. Okay. Second, it's pretty obvious he's going to try to thread the needle of incitement without violating the rules. Okay, those were the slacks that people are talking about here. In the early afternoon, writes Barry Weiss, of January 8th, the Washington Post published an open letter signed by over 300 Twitter employees to CEO Jack Dorsey demanding President Trump's ban. We must examine Twitter's complicity in what President-elect Biden has rightly termed insurrection. Number 12. But the Twitter staff assigned to evaluate the tweets quickly concluded that Trump had not violated Twitter policies. I think we have a hard time saying this is incitement, wrote one staffer. Number 13. It's pretty clear that saying American patriots are the ones who voted for him and not the terrorists, we can call them that, right? From Wednesday. Oh, wow. Another staffer agree. Don't see the incitement angle here. I'm not going to say her name, okay? I see that so-and-so has pinged us to ask about incitement for the DJT tweet, and I want to see if we can align. I don't see the incitement of fear. What PC could it be trying to incite fear about? I think we have a hard time saying this is incitement. It's pretty clear he's saying the American patriots are the ones who voted for him and not the terrorists from Wednesday. Don't see the incitement angle here. And then Barry Weiss writes, I'm also not seeing the coded incitement from the DJT tweet, wrote Annika Navaroli, a Twitter policy official. I'll respond in the elections channel and say that our team has assessed and found no violations. Let's see. It goes on and on. So she does just that. As an FYI, safety assessed the DJT tweet above and determined there is no violation of our policies at this time. Let's see. I stepped out for a while. Let me know if any action will be taken. FYI, safety is assessed, blah, blah, blah. Later, Navroli would testify to the White House January 6th committee. For months, I'd been begging and anticipating and attempting to raise the reality that if we made no intervention into what I saw occurring, people were going to die. Next, Twitter's safety team decides that President Trump's 7:44 a.m. tweet is also not in violation. They're unequivocal. It's a clear no violation. It's just to say that he's not attending the inauguration. Barry Weiss writes, to understand Twitter's decision to ban Trump, we must consider how Twitter deals with other heads of state and political leaders, including in Iran, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. In January 2018, Iran's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said, Israel is a malignant, cancerous tumor in the West Asian region that has to be removed and eradicated. It is possible and it will happen. Twitter neither deleted the tweet nor banned the Ayatollah. October of 2020, the former Malaysian prime minister said it was right for Muslims to kill millions of French people. Twitter deleted his tweet for glorifying violence, but he remained on the platform. The tweet below was taken from the Wayback Machine. That's the one that talks about how Muslims have the right to kill millions of French. Barry Weiss writes at number 22, Muhammadu Buhari, the president of Nigeria, incited violence against a pro-Biafra group. Those of us in the fields for 30 months who went through the war, we treat them in the language they understand. Twitter deleted the tweet but did not ban Buhari. 23, in October of 2021, Twitter allowed Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to call on citizens to take up arms against the Tigray region. 24, in early February 2021, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government threatened to arrest Twitter employees in India and to incarcerate them for up to 7 years if they restored hundreds of accounts that had been critical of him. Twitter did not ban Modi. Twitter executives did ban Trump, even though key staffers said that Trump had not incited violence, not even in a coded way. Number 26, less than 90 minutes after Twitter employees had determined that Trump's tweets were not in violation of Twitter policy, Vijaya Gadde, Twitter's head of legal policy and trust, asked whether it could, in fact, be coded incitement to further violence. In other words, they're just looking for something that does not exist, and they're hoping it exists, and looking for some sort of interpretation that it does exist. A few minutes later, Twitter employees on the scaled enforcement team suggest Trump's tweets may have violated Twitter's glorification of violence policy if you interpreted the phrase American patriots to refer to the rioters. Members of that team came to view him as the leader of a terrorist group responsible for violence and deaths comparable to Christchurch shooter and Hitler, and on that basis, on the totality of his tweets, he should be deplatformed. 2 hours later, Twitter executives host a 30-minute all-staff meeting. Jack Dorsey and Vijaya Gadde answer staff questions as to why Trump hadn't been banned yet, but they make some employees angrier. Number 30, multiple tweeps, Twitter employees, have quoted the banality of evil, suggesting that people implementing our policies are like Nazis following orders, relays Yoel Roth to a colleague. Dorsey requested simpler language to explain Trump's suspension. Roth wrote, "God help us, this makes me think he wants to share it publicly." 1 hour later, Twitter announces Trump's permanent suspension due to the risk of further incitement of violence. Many at Twitter were ecstatic. Let's see. Well, this feels like a piece of history. It is. Saw the message. Thank you, everyone, for the impactful work. And on as these people celebrate. And the congratulatory big props to whoever in trust and safety is sitting there whack-a-moling these Trump accounts. Can we get them one of those awesome cards I've heard about? Definitely some extraordinary acts of awesomeness going on around Twitter right now. Don Jr.'s account needs to be locked as well. See how this metastasizes? This is how it works. This is how it works. If this had been, if this had not been Twitter, but had been the United States government, and arguably with the interaction between the Department of Homeland Security, the Office of National Intelligence, the FBI, and some say the CIA, the government was indeed participating in these very acts. If they had been, that would have been the coup that everybody keeps trying to assign to President Trump, when in reality it was against him. That's the story here. Underneath all of this, as we go through all of this, you have to understand that this is being aided and abetted by the FBI, by the Office of National Intelligence, by the Director of National Intelligence. They were having meetings with these people every week, and we still don't know what happened at Facebook, and we still don't know what happened at Twitter, and we don't know what happened at Instagram, and we don't know what happened to YouTube. This is just Twitter. There is more. And we will report it. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We report the news fairly and honestly. We analyze for fact and bias. Seems like an internal debate to me. I have no problem with it. Okay, then explain the FBI meetings. Explain the Office of the National Intelligence. Explain those meetings. Explain meetings with government operatives working to clearly quash free speech in the United States. You explain that to me. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. We're going through these Twitter files. This is the fifth set. Barry Weiss, now with Free Press, formerly of the New York Times, is the collator of all of this information and the reporter of it. And so they were congratulating themselves on getting President Trump deplatformed. By the next day, employees appeared eager to tackle medical information as soon as possible. Once they had taken down the President of the United States, they were now working on trying to figure out some way of working toward the benefit of leftist policy regarding COVID-19. Yes, we absolutely plan to do this in 2021 with the timeline being as soon as possible. COVID is one specific disease. Medical misinformation is a much broader category of harmful content. We've laid a lot of the groundwork for policy and product behavior through our work on COVID and the election. The misinformation policy team at Twitter Safety, along with the folks at Health Experience Research and other teams across the company, are now focused on getting to a place of improved maturity in how our policies are actualized across reporting operations, global scale, scope, etc. We'll have even more to share on this soon. And they say thank you. For the longest time, Twitter's stance was we were not the arbiter of truth, wrote another employee, which I respected, but never gave me a warm, fuzzy feeling. So these people are now the Ministry of Truth. And all of this goes with the FBI, the Office of National Intelligence, the Director of National Intelligence, and other people in the law enforcement, the federal law enforcement, and federal intelligence agencies dealing with Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google, et cetera, every single week. The result is a clear violation of the First Amendment. Why was the government involved in a clear violation of the First Amendment? What was that all about? It didn't give me a warm, fuzzy feeling. Very excited to see us handling more categories of misinformation. For the longest time, Twitter's stance was we weren't the arbiter of truth, which never gave me a warm, fuzzy feeling. That said, my dad is an MD, and medical misinformation is a really hard topic. Even for COVID-19, we've only covered a narrow category of information. As an example is take vitamin C, vitamin D, elderberry, and xylitol with GSE daily to reduce COVID-19 risk. Good information, creative marketing, or misinformation. Personally, I'm not sure, and I suspect that there are views on both sides. Yes, it is ever thus. This is the problem when you're the Ministry of Truth. What is truth? Twitter's COO, Parag Agrawal, who would later succeed Dorsey as CEO, told the head of security, Midge Zatko, I think a few of us should brainstorm the ripple effects of Trump's ban. Agrawal added, centralized content moderation, in my opinion, has reached a breaking point now. Outside the United States, Twitter's decision to ban President Trump raised alarms, including with French President Emmanuel Macron, German Prime Minister Angela Merkel, and Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Macron told an audience he didn't want to live in a democracy where the key decisions were made by private players. I want it to be decided by a law voted on by your representatives, or by regulation, governance, or democratically discussed and approved by democratic leaders. Merkel's spokesperson called Twitter's decision to ban President Trump from its platform problematic and added that the freedom of opinion is of elementary significance. Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny criticized the ban as an unacceptable act of censorship. Whether you agree with Navalny and Macron or the executives at Twitter, we hope the latest installment of the Twitter Files gave you insight into this unprecedented decision. From the outset, our goal in investigating this story was to discover and document the steps leading up to the banning of President Trump and to put that choice into context. Ultimately, the concerns about Twitter's efforts to censor news about Hunter Biden's laptop, blacklist disfavored views, and to ban a president aren't about past choices of executives in a social media company. They're about the power of a handful of people at a private company to influence the public discourse and democracy. That's the fifth tranche from Twitter. It's awful. It's awful at any level. The fifth tranche of Twitter Files revealed staffers believe tweets written by former President Donald Trump around the events of January 6th had not actually violated its policies. The company said so anyway, and deplatformed the president. And there you go. And the underlying thing in all of this for me, and I'll put this over here, the underlying thing for me in this is the government's involved in this. The government's involved in these decisions, egging them on, adding their part to it. How much classified information was turned over to the executives at Twitter in an effort to try to get them to make the right decision? All of these things are now opened as a subject of discussion. This is the Wells Report. Hour number 3 is next. Boy, this is a bad day. See you in a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world, this is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We report the news here fairly and honestly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. In short, we depropagandize the news. I make commentary. That is not news. It's also not propaganda. It's just what I think. And that matches with what you think, even though if what you think and what I think are different, it still matches up with something called debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. We've just gone through the fifth grouping of Twitter files. There will be more, and there need to be more. What we have learned is eye-watering. And remember, the point of all of this is that there's only one social media site that's opened up to this level. We know that what has happened to this social media site, I'm talking about Twitter, happened to all the others. What did they do? What did they do to interfere with the 2022 election, the 2020 election, the 2016 election? We know that in 2016, Mark Zuckerberg threw $400 million or more at the Democrat Party. What did he do behind the scenes at Facebook, Instagram? What did he do? He didn't own Instagram at that time, but he does now. What did Alphabet do with Google? They have YouTube. There are an awful lot of people that got banned from YouTube. Strangely enough, this broadcast never was. Near as I can tell, it has never been. There may have been some shadow banning at Twitter because I made some really serious points on my Twitter feed, and they just sort of vanished. It doesn't matter. All I can say is that when you start thinking about all of these other social media platforms, regardless of whether or not they followed the Constitution of the United States, they certainly manipulated this entire nation around the ideas that were non-constitutional. It's awful. It's awful. Someone says, you know what? There is one thing that we can say. The shredders and digital shredders are working overtime at Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, all of them. They are. They're doing their dead level best to get rid of everything that Elon Musk is publicizing about Twitter. Everything. It is a mess that they have to clean up. But one thing that they cannot clean up is the interaction between federal government agencies and these very institutions of anti-American activity. And that's all it is. If you start taking out the First Amendment of the Constitution, that's anti-American activity. And this directly interfered with 1, 2, 3 elections already. Anti-American activity interfering with our elections. The releasing of some of these things, the releasing of the Twitter files, the first tranche last week, revealed that Yoel Roth, who, by the way, was Twitter's former head of safety, that first tranche of articles revealed that Roth apparently attended weekly meetings with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Director of National Intelligence about moderating content ahead of the 2020 election. Okay, Twitter is not culpable. Twitter is a private agency. But the coercion being exploited against Twitter by national agency individuals of the United States government, that is anti-constitutional, anti-American, and illegal. It is a violation of the Constitution of the United States. I want to know who they were meeting with from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I want to know who they were meeting with, the Department of Homeland Security. We already know who the Director of National Intelligence was. I want to know what they were talking about. And I don't care what political party they are part of. I could care less. It's already been pointed out, well, you know, this happened during the Trump administration. Yeah, well, that takes us right back to the deep state now, doesn't it? Was the DOJ working to the benefit of Donald Trump or to sabotage Donald Trump? How about the FBI? We know the FBI was trying to sabotage him. We know the office, the DOJ, Rod Rosenstein, the FBI, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, on and on, the deep state. There was also something else when it came to Yoel Roth. There was a doctoral dissertation from the University of Pennsylvania from Mr. Roth, and Twitter CEO Elon Musk tweeted about it. What happened? Well, the University of Pennsylvania immediately dropped it from their website. Immediately. On Saturday afternoon, Musk tweeted about Roth's 2016 dissertation at the University of Pennsylvania titled Gay Data, which suggested ways to improve the LGBTQ dating app Grindr. Musk highlighted Roth's argument on page 248 in which Roth suggested that sites like Grindr should consider, quote, crafting safety strategies that can accommodate a wide variety of use cases, including for young adults. Except they're not young adults. Musk said in his tweet, looks like Yoel is arguing in favor of children being able to access adult internet services in his PhD thesis. Here's what the thesis said. Okay? Let me see if I can make sure that this is the entire part of it here. Let me double check this. Let me go back. Yeah, okay. This is the whole thing. It's worth considering how, if at all, the current generation of popular sites of gay networked sociability might fit into an overall queer social landscape that increasingly includes individuals under the age of 18. Even with the service's extensive content management, Grindr may be too lewd or too hookup oriented to be a safe and age-appropriate resource for teenagers. But the fact that people under 18 are on these services already indicates that we can't readily dismiss these platforms out of hand as loci for queer youth culture, rather than merely trying to absolve themselves of legal responsibility or worse, trying to drive out teenagers entirely. Service providers should instead focus on crafting safety strategies that can accommodate a wide variety of use cases for platforms like Grindr, including possibly their role in safely connecting queer young adults. I don't know what the age of consent is in Pennsylvania. I know that in Illinois and in Texas, it's 17. I also know that these are the same people that have been arguing for being able to go into our schools and bring drag shows, LGBTQ plus health advocates in to talk to people from 14 to 18 when the age of consent is 17. That happened in Illinois. I looked it up yesterday. So on Saturday and Sunday, the dissertation was inaccessible on the University of Pennsylvania's Scholarly Commons website, according to Internet Archives on the Wayback Machine. A note next to the work's title on the website during that time said this paper has been withdrawn. The university told Fox News in a statement the designation was a mistake that has since been corrected. On December 10th, access to the dissertation of University of Pennsylvania graduate Yoel Roth, PhD, was mistakenly closed off on Scholarly Commons, one of the two digital sites on which dissertation by Penn doctoral graduates can be publicly accessed. This according to Director of Media Relations Ron Ozio. That error triggered a preset statement in the vendor's system inaccurately indicating the paper had been withdrawn. The dissertation can now be accessed on both Scholarly Commons and ProQuest. Roth did not immediately respond to Fox News' inquiry about the entire circumstance. So, this is the guy that is moderating the public debate across the nation on the national, if not the world, town square. This is a man who is essentially a college academic. He states that he wanted to change the world. He couldn't do so in academics, and that's why he was doing what he was doing. Well, he put himself in exactly the right position, didn't he? Absent any kind of check or balance. A place where he could ignore the Constitution and the Bill of Rights of the United States of America. That exposes just a glaring flaw in how all of this is being used politically in our nation to affect a political outcome of civic societal events. Read elections. This one guy, Yoel Roth, who is at least an advocate for Grindr life. And that doesn't bother me per se. But this one director of safety, now opining in his PhD thesis about how you can safely involve people under the age of consent to take part in, okay, I'll use his terminology, queer dating sites. Are the wrong people making the decisions? The answer is yes. Well, who are the right people? We, the people, are the right people. We don't have ministries of truth here. Everybody who says free speech is not an absolute right are absolutely wrong. Free speech is an absolute right. That's what debate is for. Debate is the moderation that these people are seeking. You can't have debate if you can only have one side of a conversation. That is why we live in the United States of America, a country created in the 18th century to avoid all of this. And yet, we're turning it into that ourselves. This is the Wells Report. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. The word is tranches. Let me look that up for you because it gets used a lot in the current lexicon. Tranches, 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 a portion of something. It's normally money. In other words, say for example, you're paying off a car and your payment is $500. Well, that $500 is a tranche of payment. In other words, tranches are pieces of pooled collection of securities, usually debt instruments that are split up by risk or other characteristics. So what they're being used is they're sort of being conflated into a journalistic sense. In other words, a group of documents. Okay, it's not the right word to use. It is essentially they just be files. Okay, so it's tranches, batches of typically money or securities. Okay, and that's what that is. Thought you'd like to know. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. We were just talking about what the rest of this is going to be. What will Facebook do? What will Google do? Google meaning YouTube. What will they do? Are they going to open themselves up to the same kind of horrified ridicule that Twitter, at least the previous owners of Twitter, so richly deserve? Something tells me I doubt it very much. I doubt it very much. But they should. What will the American government do? What will our legislative branch do? There have been rules in the past dealing with companies that provided public information. There are rules that said you had to operate in the public interest as a public trustee. In other words, you had to follow the precepts and ideas of the Constitution of the United States because that was in the public interest. Those don't exist anymore. And they must. What's interesting to me in all of this, if I can say something positive about these people, there were many people in Twitter that knew this was wrong. They knew that it was the wrong thing to do. And there were people around the world, as soon as Donald Trump was deplatformed from Twitter, they sounded the alarm. But the mainstream media normally would publish that story as if it were, well, as horrifying as the governments of Europe thought it was. But you see, they didn't, because they were participants. They are participants in this gross misinformation, disinformation cabal, this conspiracy. And we have been arguing against it for years. This broadcast wouldn't exist except to argue against the corporate media ideal, especially when the corporate media chooses to abandon truth and choose political sides. Look at where we have found ourselves. Smoking gun evidence of the government of the United States conspiring with social media outside the purvey of the Constitution of the United States to quell and quash the First Amendment of the United States. Like I said, Twitter's absent any kind of real liability. But the FBI, the Office of National Intelligence, the DOJ, they are not. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. As we come to this conversation, the Biden administration is currently working over a section of Title IX. And what they are doing is they are trying to figure out a rule to govern sexual assault allegations on campus. The intent is to provide victims of sexual misconduct some protection that they already do not possess, apparently. The result, however, could be unfair treatment of accused students. These are often young men. Ingrid Jacques of USA Today has written an op-ed piece that I think you should know about, especially if you have a child currently involved in the academy. In other words, the university and college system around the United States. She says the Biden administration is working on a new Title IX rule governing sexual assault allegations on campus. The result could be unfair treatment of accused students. Title IX is the federal civil rights law that bans discrimination based on sex at educational institutions receiving federal money. Its reach has greatly expanded in the past 5 decades. When President Biden took office, one of the first orders of business was to unravel regulations former Education Secretary Betsy DeVos had implemented in 2020. DeVos went through an intensive rulemaking process to revise the guidelines around campus tribunals. This followed years of mounting lawsuits and court filings and rulings that found these investigations unfair for the accused. DeVos sought a framework that balanced the rights of all students involved while maintaining essential due process and free speech provisions. Yet, President Biden took these changes as a personal affront, as he had led efforts while vice president in the Obama administration to force schools into tilting campus courts in favor of accusers through a series of letters that carried with them the threats of withheld funds if the schools did not comply. Since DeVos and her team took time to craft a formal rule, the Biden administration must do the same. It released proposed changes in June, and the public had 2 months to comment on them. The rule received a whopping 240,000 comments, twice the number that the Title IX rule garnered. So the Education Department is now sorting through the feedback and responding accordingly. There's several months into the process. The administration is expected to have the new rule in place this spring or at the latest next fall. Two of the most important changes under the Trump administration centered on protecting students' basic rights. They called for a sort of live hearing to take place, as well as cross-examination, banned the use of the word single investigators, which put the investigation and judgment into the hands of one person, a model many universities used. Another change aligned the definitions of sexual harassment to one the U.S. Supreme Court used as a standard. The prior definition was so broad it had gotten faculty and students into trouble for simply saying or writing the wrong thing, a direct attack on freedom of speech. As an example, in 2015, several offended students brought a Title IX complaint against Northwestern University professor Laura Kipnis, who was investigated after writing a piece advocating for less strict rules governing professor-student relationships. Joe Cohn, Legislative and Policy Director for the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, says once again loosening the harassment definition would be one of the most egregious changes. The truth of the matter is we're allowed to say rude things. There's no shortage of opinions that someone may find offensive on the topic of sexuality. Right. And so, why do I bring this up? Well, if you have a son in the academy, you might want to see what he can't do about getting out of there as quickly as he possibly can, especially if these rules go into effect. Now, I'm sure they won't last. And the reason I'm sure they won't last is because, let's put it this way, sooner or later, these policies are going to have to deal with the Constitution of the United States. But let me give you a couple of problem children that whoever is putting these new laws together are going to have to deal with. At Austin Peay State University, a female student reported a sexual assault by a stranger. Campus police determined the events described did not occur. The female false accuser later told the police she was not assaulted. Abriana Ray Beth Dutil made a false accusation to the police. The police charged Ms. Dutil for filing a false police report in March of 2016. At Clemson University, a campus police officer said a report of a student being sexually assaulted on campus was untrue, September 2016. The College of Charleston, 2 students had a Valentine hookup date. Afterwards, the female fabricated an assault and accused her date of rape. Paul Robinson was always innocent, was cleared by a jury, December 2017. Colorado State University Pueblo settled with falsely accused Grant Neal, July 2017. Columbia University settled with an innocent accused, Paul Nungesser, July 2017. Cornell University, false accusation was made against a basketball player, Xavier Eglin. He was always innocent. The court agreed. All charges against Xavier were dropped August 2017. Delta College, University Center, Michigan. Student Mary Zolkowski falsely reported to campus police she was attacked and raped. Zolkowski was charged with 1 count of falsely reporting a felony. Duke rape hoax. 10 years later, black stripper Crystal Gayle Magnum, currently in prison for murdering her boyfriend, falsely accused 3 white athletes of rape, March 2016. George Washington University student Miriam Kashani falsely accused 2 black men of raping a white girl at knife point. After all hell broke loose on campus, Kashani's lawyer called campus police to say her client had completely fabricated the interracial rape, December 1990. At Hofstra University, female Danmel Ndoye falsely accused 5 innocent males of rape when her new boyfriend found out she had sex. Later, Danmel admitted her sex orgy was consensual. Liberty University, a female student reported an abduction and sexual assault that was not true. Underwood University student Joanna Newberry lied, saying she was attacked in the basement bathroom of Butler Library. Newberry was dismissed from Lindenwood, charged with a misdemeanor count of making a false report. Miami University serial accuser Angela Camronis and other officials were sued for discredited allegations against David Gia. He is seeking justice against the university that railroaded him at that January 2017. Michigan State University campus police say a false rape report was filed, accusing 3 black males of assault. Investigators said the report was false and attempted sexual assault didn't actually happen. Rape hoax at Northwestern University. 4 females falsely claimed they were raped. After shrieking protests and hysteria ensued, it was determined the source of the false rape accusations were anonymous phone calls. Vice President for Student Affairs Patricia Tellez had to admit the accusations were false. Now, are there rapes on campus? Yes. Are there sexual assaults on campus? Yes. Depending on where you go, you can find statistics that say only 5 to 6%, somewhere between 5 and 10% of these are false. They'll tell you that many of these never are reported at all. In other words, there are all kinds of stories about all of this. The problem with all of it is that the only way to solve any of it is to turn it over to the people who do these things. There should never be an on-campus tribunal of any kind. We don't do tribunals in the United States. Not even when it comes to arch terrorists that slaughter Americans just because they don't like us. We don't do tribunals. If you're sexually assaulted on campus, call the cops. Let the police do the investigation. The universities should have nothing to do with it, except to follow the Constitution. What's going to happen here, if we can use the already existing models given to us by the Biden administration, is that you're going to have to prove that you're innocent if somebody accuses you of any of these arch crimes, as opposed to them proving that you're guilty. The only way for us to be able to have some idea of what actually did happen or what did not happen is to turn it over to the police, not the campus police, not the campus administrators, the police. The campus police, once they are understood that a rape has taken place or there's an accusation of rape, they immediately call the local constabulary and they say, okay, we can't investigate this because we're campus police. You have to do it. Done. And yes, if there's a false report, those people are charged. If there's an actual rape, those people are charged. These people are supposed to be the best and brightest. You have two groups of people that are over 18. Most high school graduates are over 18 years old or 18. They're adults now. They get to make real decisions. They get to vote. They get to do all kinds of things. They get to be held responsible for their idiocy. And that's how you learn. But we don't want to ruin somebody's life because right at the beginning he decided to take down a female that said no. Oh, yes, we do. Because word gets around. I have 4 sons. I live in abject fear that one of them is going to be, I only have to really worry about one. But I live in abject fear that he's going to be accused of making some sort of sexual advance. I happen to know this kid pretty well. He doesn't date much. As a matter of fact, he missed golden opportunities to date when he was in high school because he didn't get his driver's license until he was 23. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not especially worried about Colton because he's quite a man. He does what I've always said I told all my sons. Mind your manners and keep your hands to yourself. It works. He does it. He's a good man. He'll be okay. But still, the two groups of people that are over 18, those are the people that bundle themselves up and go to a college, which is basically an extension of their adolescence. Those people that bundle themselves up and go to a trade school or join the United States military, they become adults right now, and they're held accountable for being adults right now, and they get on with their lives right now. What fascinates me is that for whatever reason, the people that say, for example, oh, I don't know, join the military, like my middle son, my third son, Mitchell, why those people with real world experience in war zones, oh, by the way, are thought of as less than these people that basically just extended their teenage adolescence into their 20s in an academic situation that is more indoctrination than enlightenment. Yet those are the people that seem to be making the decisions. That does, however, seem to be, shall we say, a pathological problem in a divided country where decision-making is suspect. We've had nothing more than a perfect example of inexperienced academics bandying about things they don't know anything about, specifically the Constitution and Bill of Rights of the United States of America, specifically. And we see this Lord of the Flies mentality coursing through that culminates in 300 Twitter employees writing an open letter to their boss calling for the deplatforming of a United States president. It's outrageous. I was just discussing that with a young, talented guy with all kinds of potential and so on and so forth, but is so disrespectful and so blind. The thought processes like his, he's in his salad days. He's a kid. He'll learn. But thought processes like his are the reason that there are kids' tables. Go have a good time. Go enjoy. Don't eat too much sugar. The adults are going to talk. Okay. See you later. See, what we have not done in the United States since the 60s is to require good form and manners on the part of our young people. And having never learned them, they are now older, in their middle years, and wreaking havoc with reasonable behavior in virtually every corner of American life. This is the Wells Report. That, by the way, was an opinion. Back with more in just a moment. Thanks for joining us today. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Mark just said, I need to go back and watch this. I walked in a couple of minutes ago out of town for a week. Mark, it's been a pretty good show. You ought to pay attention. Talked a little bit about the terrorist that has been captured finally and will face trial in the United States of America. That's a good thing for you to ask me about, by the way. Let me get this picked up on. Let me see what I can do here. Lockerbie, BIE, Lockerbie court appearance. Let's see here. Let me see what's going on here. To make first court appearance. Okay. Let me see if I can find some news here. All right. Here we go. This from ABC News. Federal prosecutors announced they will not seek the death penalty against a Libyan intelligence officer accused of building the bomb that blew up Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland in 1988, killing 270 people, including 190 Americans. Some family members of those killed in the bombing were in the Washington, D.C. area federal courtroom to watch the first federal hearing for the suspect, Abu Aguila Muhammad Masood Khair el-Marimi. The defendant was recently taken into custody by U.S. authorities, extradited to the U.S. over the weekend. Masood is the third individual charged in connection with the downing of Pan Am Flight 103, but the first to appear in an American courtroom. You've been charged by indictment with, in count one, destruction of an aircraft resulting in death, said U.S. Magistrate Robin Meriwether. She began to recite the three charges faced by Masood, who did not enter a plea. While conviction in any of the charges carries the possibility of the death penalty, in 2022, federal prosecutor Eric Kennerson told Meriwether his office would not pursue it because the counts were not death eligible in 1988 when the bombing occurred. His actions killed all 259 passengers and crew on board the aircraft and 11 people on the ground, Kennerson said in court. Countless families have never fully recovered as a result of his actions and never fully will recover. A federal public defender represented Masood during the hearing, but asked for an additional time for Masood to hire his own attorney. I cannot talk until I see my attorney, said Masood, speaking through an interpreter. He's being held without bail in a Virginia detention center. He was given until December 19th to arrange for his own attorney to represent him. A detention hearing is scheduled for December 27th. There you go. That's the latest. Okay, so in other words, for the first time, we have someone involved in the downing of Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, in a United States courtroom. Something else that came up in the broadcast today had to do with age of consent. Regarding, this is news that in the past couple of days, Project Veritas made contact with a dean of students at a prestigious Chicago private school, charging some $40,000 or more for tuition from kindergarten through grade 12. And he told this story about LGBTQ folks coming to LGBTQ health advocates coming to speak to his high school students, aged 14 through 18, about the joys and wonders of gay sex with appropriate tools of the trade. Probably a bad way of saying it. I'm not going to say it again because I was so incredibly uncomfortable saying it yesterday. I just don't want to do it. But what I did do is I did this. As I said, what's the age of consent in Illinois? Turns out that it's 17. That means that kids that are 14, 15, and 16 are being exposed to things that are crimes. And then, of course, Yoel Roth, who was the safety director of Twitter before he resigned, was talking in his doctoral thesis about making things safer for young queer kids to be able to access Grindr, which is a hookup site for LGBTQ people. And I said to myself, okay, so what is the basic age of consent in the United States? Unrestricted age of consent, Alabama is 19 years old. 19. It's as low as 16 years of age in some states. American Samoa, it's 16. Indiana, 16. Iowa, Kansas. Maine, it's 16. Mississippi, age 16. Nebraska, Nevada, 16. Let's see, North Carolina is 16 years of age. Let's see, Puerto Rico, 16. South Carolina, 16. South Dakota, 16. The rest are 17, 18, 19. As a matter of fact, I just noticed that in Washington State, the age of consent is 21. So tell me again about all these kids in kindergarten and middle school and so on and so forth being taught sex education. Anybody thought that maybe the age of consent's being violated there? Or is that another reason why you watch the Wells Report? Which is what you have been doing. Thank you very much. I sincerely appreciate your doing so. This was an important broadcast. Lots of news today. So much so, we didn't get to all of it. We'll try to remedy that tomorrow. Until then, God bless you and yours. May your day be wonderful and your evening even better. And I'll see you again tomorrow. All right, my friends. I love all y'all. Thanks so much for being with us, okay? Why such low national reading and math scores? We focus on sex all the time. No kidding. Yeah. Talking about the difference between spit and lube in a prestigious Chicago prep school. You've got to be kidding. No, it's absolutely ridiculous. By the way, good to see you again, Cleo. Hope everything's okay. God bless all y'all. I'm going to move on here. I've got some things I've got to get done, but until tomorrow, take good care of yourself. Thanks for being with us today.